actually, as I checked the news today, there was another protest in Taksim Square for one of the, not a protester, a 14-year, correct me if I'm not correct, a 14 years old kid going to market to buy bread, and then he was hit by the tear canister, so he has been in coma since like 5 months. And there was like again like protests going in Taksim Square and police brutality just dispersing the protesters. So the struggle is going on, and there are some forms of solidarity, but I don't know how effective will they be for the future mobilizations. But all I can say, when I went back to Turkey for Christmas, I went with my mom to the rally in Kadıköy, and there were some protesters who opened the Kurdish leader Abdullah Öcalan's poster, and my mom is like a nationalist secular woman, so it's just like seeing like some people from PKK just makes her creep, and she was like murmuring too. But I think like, but despite that, she continued to stay in that space. So I think it's something new, like she's for the first time facing with the Kurdish people, like Kurdish workers people. So there are some like good things happening too, and it's not like, okay, you're getting violent against each other, but how to move it to an effective state, I don't know about that.
What kind of hegemony was that? What kind of consolidation? Was that your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
More into the mic a little bit.
Okay. I think we can approach that question in two ways. First of all, in economical terms, AKP was a great project in terms of integrating middle-sized, small-sized business entrepreneurs and direct them to the export-oriented production, because 2001 crisis is all about these foreign exchange deficits. So it's a great strategy to lead the Anatolian tigers to the export-oriented field. But beyond that, it's a great hegemonic consolidation among different fractions of capital, because the big fractions of capital also agree AKP's economic policies as well, and it goes in a direction with US and European Union policies. And this European Union process also opens the way to democratization process. It softens the Kurdish problem. Leyla Zana and 3 other Kurdish former members of the parliament were released from prison. It softens Kurdish language things, and against military, they opened, they had a big fight against military and their place in the Turkish politics. But at the last instance, we are seeing that this hegemony is shattering down, because I think AKP was never honest about its democracy promise. It was a democracy for, as far as I can understand, from both Kurdish question, women's positions, and students' movements, and imprisoned journalists, and all. I mean, it's very authoritarian right now, and we saw that it is democratic for just for its own supporters, right? And I think we can see this continuation of very authoritative Turkish state tradition here as well. It reconsolidates its own authoritarian repressive state apparatus and ideological state apparatus, and now there is, I mean, I'm just saying that I'm ending it. We saw that there is no public space to fight against AKP government. This is why Gezi revolt emerged in a day, because people are imprisoned and they faced with police brutality every day, and they can't speak. I mean, free speech became almost impossible, both in televisions and in newspapers. So it was our only way to open our public space to fight against the authoritarian government. Yeah.
There was one question about what happened to the sense of solidarity that was built across some of the fractures that exist in Turkish politics and have dominated Turkish politics for the last few decades. And I mean, there's no easy answer to that question. On the one hand, I just want to highlight the point that what I see as a very healthy attempt to overcome some of those fault lines between secularist people and Islamist people, between Kurds and Turks and so on. It happened mostly in Taksim Square, and we still need to study the degree to which other cities were able to manage that kind of solidarity. I know, for example, from Izmir that there wasn't the same kind of solidarity. In fact, Turkish nationalists dominated the movement in Izmir. I don't know exactly what the dynamics was in Ankara and in some of the other cities, but I'm sure that there were significant variations between different cities. Maybe the difference with Istanbul had to do with two things. First of all, the Taksim Solidarity, the umbrella group that tried to gently give direction to the movement without dominating it, without dictating what to do. They were a group of left-wing people who had a vision about what kind of solidarity they wanted to see established, and they wanted to, as much as possible, to encourage that kind of solidarity. And the second advantage of Taksim, of course, had to do with the fact that there was indeed a commune that was established for about 2 weeks without too much police intervention, and the reality of the commune actually made certain kinds of dialogue and certain types of solidarity possible, which did not happen in other places. In Ankara, for example, it was violent every single day, and it seemed very difficult to establish those kinds of ties if you did not already establish them before somewhere else. As to the question of what has been happening since then, I don't have a clear answer. I mean, the Prime Minister himself has done everything in his power to reconsolidate some of the differences, both between Islamists and Turks. He tried to, some of his support base shrank, but he wanted to make that base more and more rigid in its politics. And he tried very hard to separate that group from any possibility of identifying with secular people in Turkey. He has also done other things. There have been gestures against that too. I mean, gestures, counter gestures, going back and forth to basically undo what the Prime Minister was trying to do. He started basically to blame secular people participating in the Gezi movement. The Prime Minister was saying, oh, the people who went for refuge in such and such mosque were simply consuming alcohol and so on. And then he said women in headscarves are being attacked by Gezi protesters. He started putting all kinds of blame, but then there were people who tried to take a position against that. They started saying, well, this hasn't happened. Women in headscarves and feminist women marched together on the streets of Istanbul. Then there were, during Ramadan, regularly there were collective public dinners organized near Taksim Square by a group called Anti-Capitalist Muslims. And then secular people, gays, lesbians, activists from all sides came and participated in those breaking the fast kind of events, and it became a beautiful moments of solidarity. So all this happened throughout the summer, went back and forth between the Prime Minister trying to provoke hatred and distrust between groups and groups trying to resist that and so on. I don't know where people stand at the moment. I mean, it's hard to see. We haven't seen new tests of what is happening at the moment. There are situations where you still see people trying to hold on to what has been now called the Gezi spirit, which is partly about that sense of solidarity. But it's hard to say what's happening. I said, I've spoken too much, but I just want to say one thing. I wanted to end my talk by saying a few things about what is happening in the very recent period, especially since the corruption scandal that came out in middle of December. The repression has multiplied, and now we have not just a crisis of hegemony, a crisis of democracy in Turkey, but we also have an institutional crisis happening between different levels of state. Any sense of balance of powers between the executive and the judiciary and so on is being destroyed. And we have a major crisis happening at the moment. And what people are doing is people are extremely politicized, extremely angry and frustrated. And sometimes it can be a good thing, sometimes it can be a paralyzing thing. I mean, you may be so overwhelmed with this sense of ongoing crisis. I mean, it's like an endless earthquake. Every single day, several times a day, there are new news coming out about something else. 50 judges transferred from one place to the other. 300 policemen have been removed because they decided to act on the order of judges to go and make some arrests for corruption and so on. Every single day, there's something going on. It's like waves and waves of tsunami hitting people every day. And I don't know what this is going to lead to politically. It can be energizing once again if there is any sense of hope and any sense of solidarity and any political organizing that can pull people together. Or it may just lead to complete depoliticization because people are so overwhelmed. They are like spectators watching this adventure movie happening in front of their eyes every single day. I don't know, it's a moment of great uncertainty at the moment.
I just want to underscore, want to say one thing. There were hundreds of novelties in this protest. Many things were new. But I want to draw your attention to two most prominent elements that were used in the revolt. One, commune, Gezi commune and Taksim commune, barricades. Communes and barricades are not new. They have been used in all major revolts and revolutions through the history of modernity. And one point that I want to make, I will be blunt. All the theses of great revolutionaries such as Leon Trotsky and Lenin are proved in this revolt. Read their accounts of 1905, read their accounts of 1917. They were all existing in this revolt. And the problem that they laid out in their political text, the problem of the revolutionary subject. There is a crisis, revolutionary crisis, there will be mass revolts, they said, but the question is, who will lead these revolts? Who will lead the political program that is needed for overthrowing capitalism? And in this revolt, this was the biggest question. The masses revolted, but the problem was the problem of leadership. Thank you.
I would like to talk about spread of protest across the country. So it was a kind of attempt to protect the, how can I say, lifestyles as well. Yes, because people worried of the authoritarian conservative policies and rhetoric of Erdogan, and such as, I mean, having 3 children or I don't know, something like that. 1-bedroom apartment units are not good for Turkish conservative culture. I don't know what kind of culture, something like that, for the construction of new houses. So that's why everyone started to resist in Turkey, and just essentially some people from some other religious sects in Turkey. So they just started to resist because of that. Finally, I would like to say about solidarity, and I would like to say about future assumptions. The only thing that I can say that people in Turkey realize that being on the streets is something good. It's something good. So they are ready for being in the streets again. Just essentially, it will happen, I guess, soon because of this new internet censorship law and something like that. Yeah, and that's why it created a kind of culture of resistance.
I guess I can say something about the question of the solidarity issue because I agree with Murad. Maybe I'm a little bit biased about that. I don't know about with Yashim's question about the leadership. I do think there is a question of leadership, but not in the way that we historically understood leadership in this kind of movements. So I think what Gezi has done is to really raise questions about that. I mean, what kind of leaders do we seek? And do we seek leaders in the way that are already, part and parcel of our everyday lives, like in terms of taking control of our lives through the different promises that they have given us. So I think there is an issue there. So the second part, in terms of the public, I think in a way what this has brought up, and we have seen that all over a larger Middle Eastern context, is the question of space. How was space historically, especially in countries like Turkey, Syria, somebody mentioned Lebanon before. Egypt was used, and how over a longer period of time it has been really taken and privatized. And what we have seen here is a privatization on one level of the space and contested in that kind of way, but also privatization of people's communities. So now you are really buying more and more space, and basically what we have seen in Gezi there was a lot of people were going to different taverns, cafes, and places where people were speaking, and intellectuals were there as well. So those people were really forced out because now the space has to be privatized. So there is that kind of question that I think is being re-centralized again. What is a space and what is a public space, and what kinds? And I think it was Palin's, and in the end, but I cannot find it here, where you are ending, already pedestrianized, there is no need for you. I think in a way what this really brings theoretically for us, but also empirically, is that people, by being at the Gezi, they are already making claims to the space. So that cannot, even though I know there is a kind of a reinsertion of authoritarianism, that space itself already, that kind of feeling, that affect that people feel in connection to this is our space, and we can have conversations with each other, and we can share food, which historically was part and parcel of the Turkish context, cannot be taken away. And I think theoretically it raises a question for dominant theories of radical left. How we say the right to space. But maybe it's not about the right to space. This is ontologically, this is our space. So why would we be saying, let's reinsert again a right and making claims to the space? Because in a way, this is what neoliberal agendas want, or AKP agendas want. Erdogan is trying to go back to an Ottoman Empire, but not Ottoman Empire 1453 like I inserted before, but an Ottoman Empire with neoliberal capital. So how can you do those two? And I think Murat's point about the house is very important. Can you do Ottoman Empire today with neoliberal capital without thinking about maybe 10 rooms, or without thinking of a lifestyle that the son sleeps in one room, that you have whatever office and things like that. So I think it raises a lot of questions even of how we think of households. how we think of our own existential question. Like, I mean, who are we, in relationship to space? I'm going to leave it there. Financial capital, because I do think, especially in the Mediterranean nation states, intensified extensively, but also the speculation process, was really basically putting people's lives at stake. And the second thing, though, that I wanted to bring, especially with the Middle East, and I think, what's your name? Sama brought up. I think this is one thing we didn't talk a lot about, but I think it was very central in the Turkish context, is the war in the Middle East. I mean, and I think you were bringing the Kurdish question here, a war both within Turkey, but also the surroundings. I mean, Turkey was trying to consolidate its own power and its financial power within the larger Middle Eastern context, because partially it wasn't seen as much a future within the European context. So part of the contestation, and I think as Gin brought, that's correct, brought it up in terms of the fractures of the different capitalist classes within Turkey, had a lot to do with that. So where do we look? What kind of orientation do we take? And I do agree with Greg as well that there is a total privatization, but I think simultaneously there is also the desire, especially geopolitically, to think of Turkey as the leader, because now there are gaps there. I mean, Syria, that's why Syria is a very important context. I mean, because Turkey has played a very significant role with the Turkish community there, but the Kurdish that was invested in a neoliberal project was fighting against the Turkish of the left. The radical left there. So that's a very important, kind of questions for us to think a little bit more centrally. How can neoliberal privatization cannot happen without war? And really, I mean, Gezi part really, to some extent, and the stealing of land has to do with that. I mean, and the conduct question that we're raising, we are really, what happened? There has been a reprivatization of all the resources within the Middle East. We start from Iraq, we go to Afghanistan, Libya, of course, and then Syria now, intensification. You brought up Israel. I mean, I am originally from Cyprus. I mean, there is a huge intensification around the energy question. So these are things that are really very central in the contestation. But I think to agree with Greg, but also at the same time, the socialist forces question, I think, is being opened up, raising questions for us. What is a socialism? And what kinds of vision do different groups of people are really seeking? And I think this is also, the question that is for us very crucial around thinking, what does it really mean to consolidate socialist forces, when in a lot of ways, I mean, and I had a bunch of things here that when I was thinking about gentrification was one of them, long-term repression of Kurds, but it's not just Kurds in Turkey. We are also talking about other people, Armenians, Greeks, Jewish populations. So that's
and Romani population.
Exactly right. Then, which is very important. I mean, and that raises a lot of question around the question of, to think about Canadian context, the Aboriginal question. So anyway, I mean, I think maybe what is important for us is to ask, how do we really envision the socialist forces being consolidated, and what kinds of things we have to take into account? So, I mean, for instance, violence against women, even within the left, I mean, we saw that a lot in Egypt. And we saw that in Turkey as well. When you go to football teams, I mean, they are screaming, "You're like a woman," So that these kinds of, and I liked, Pelin's thing that she brought it up. I don't think it's enough for us to just say we will consolidate socialist forces. We have to think, what does it really mean? How does it look like? What kind of vision does it really, imagine itself to have? Without necessarily going back to a memorialization reinserts conservative and authoritarian agendas. So that's.
I think a y-axis translates as fiscal balance. So, as Greg said, the crisis hit the advanced capitalist countries in 2008, and it transformed. It has taken different forms in different spaces. In Eastern Europe, in Mediterranean countries such as Greece, as you see, the result was sovereign debt crisis due to worsening fiscal imbalances. But in countries such as Turkey, rather than fiscal imbalance, is seen a huge inflow of capital, hence growing current account imbalance. And current account imbalance, I mean, basically means the things that are coming to the country are much, much higher than things that are going out. So this means that in a context where you have a huge current account imbalance, if the capital says, foreign capital says, I'm going home, you're unstable, then you're in a bad shape. You will encounter hit by a crisis most likely. And Turkey, the imbalance in Turkey, the tension in Turkey is exactly that. The capital says, your country is very fragile, I need to go. So the economic and political crisis in Turkey now merges. And just one final point. As I tried to say, the crisis that hit Canada and the United States in 2008, and that transformed as a sovereign debt crisis in the Mediterranean countries, and as current account imbalances in countries such as Turkey. It's the same crisis. It's the same crisis, sisters and brothers. And in Turkey, we experienced a huge political event. But Canada, which is apparently a very democratic country, has its own problems which are due to capitalism too. Now they're attacking the public services, especially the postal workers. If we want to take this Gezi spirit in Canada, we have to be in solidarity, we have to build solidarity links with the postal workers, public workers, and all the working class in Canada.
I'd like to say something about this issue of saying enough. So, because I think that, Gezi movement was not only something for saying enough against urban regime and conservatism, but I guess it was also against the society model that was envisaged by the military coup of 1980. And this is my assumption. This is my assumption is that even though AKP created a kind of representation that they are struggling for cleaning the ruins of the military coup of 1980. I think that AKP is the best model that the military coup envisaged in the 1980s. So that was a kind of saying enough against this society model of the military coup of 1980.
After some of the economic analysis, this is going to sound very light, perhaps, but I want to end with a perhaps more cheerful note than what I might have expressed earlier. And I want to perhaps focus a little bit on this notion of affect that Anna talked about. I think we need to, I think that the very fact that we had that summer, the very fact that people experienced what it is like to be in the streets, to claim the streets, to talk to one another, to start touching each other and to face each other and to start communicating with one another, which they had not done. It means a lot. I think once people have tasted this, I think that's how people lost sense of fear last summer. With all the gas and so on, at one point there was no sense of fear. People were out day after day after day. They would stay in the square day after day, precisely for that sense of pleasure. That sheer pleasure of being in touch with other human beings and starting to talk with one another and so on. And I saw that later in the summer too, during some of these park forums that were taking place across the city of Istanbul, in several places all at once and so on, where people were talking about everything, from the very local neighborhood issues to national issues, to discussing the economy, to discussing imperialism and global politics and so on. I think that's probably something we can hold on to. That the very public memory of that, if that's kept alive, if we can keep pictures of the graffiti and so on, I think we can perhaps, I mean, we of course need the objective conditions which are there, which have been there for a long time. But on top of that, I think we need that sense of the emotional side of all of this, which has been extremely powerful and which will probably encourage people to go out again. They want to live that moment again. I mean, the number of young people I heard from last summer, unfortunately, I missed the heyday of the Gezi movement when things were happening in the Taksim Square, but I was in Istanbul later. But the number of young people I heard from who said this was the happiest period of their lives. They had never been so happy in their lives has been incredible. I mean, there are some columnists who are saying that when they walked across the city, people were smiling. And people had suddenly become very gentle to one another. I mean, instead of pushing each other on the street and being impatient and being rude and so on, suddenly the whole mannerisms changed. That means a lot. I mean, that really shows something. And maybe we can hold on to that in addition to some of the objective realities of what has been happening to the economy and class forces and so on.